Good morning. Maybe if we start, everybody else will come. It takes silence for people to come. So I should do like Bishu says, if you're listening to me, clap once. If you're listening to me, clap twice. If you hear me, clap 3 times. Good, it works. Thank you, Bishu. And Bishu should be here, but I wanted to begin the day by checking on yesterday. An important part of holistic management is the monitoring loop, the feedback loop, and understanding that that feedback from the land or our finances or our people informs us as to what to do next. So not that we're going to change much what we plan for today, but I would like to hear from you with noise, applause, cheers, or silence. How did you think yesterday went? Thank you. That's great. I feel the same. Very grateful for yesterday. I wanted to take 2 minutes to bring to your attention the amazing artwork that is behind all of you there. Take the time to look at it because it's so beautiful and it captures so much, not only the conversations we're having in terms of the land, that is what is uniting us here, but the real thing, that is about people. The funny thing about this story is that when I came into the room, I knew there was this group that was going to be doing visual minutes, they call them. To me, it's much more like amazing art expression, visual inspiration. But I enter and I see here my friend, Tim Castle. He's the owner and founder of Creative Connections. And 13 years ago, when Savannah, my daughter, was still here, he came to our ranch in Colorado. And he facilitated. He's a mentor, he's a facilitator, he's a coach, a trainer, a business advisor. He's just works with people on transformative narratives and getting us to do all these things we want to do. And for some reason, the system doesn't allow us or something that our mind doesn't allow us to do. So he frees people's minds. It's quite amazing. And Tim Castle came and facilitated 2 workshops on our ranch on 2 consecutive years. And it was 2 of the most amazing workshops we've ever facilitated. And team building and business, transformation of business. It was quite amazing. He was inspired also by our place, and he buys in Wales this amazing little farm. And so when Savannah was 4, we went and visited him in Wales. And that was the last time we saw each other. We've been in touch, but we haven't seen each other since then. And as I entered the room, here is Tim. And I can believe you are the one that is gifting us with this amazing work because I know how good it is. So I want to bring Tim to the stage and give us a few words because apart from great musician and artist, a coach, he's just an amazing person and you all need to know him. He always looks like he's 28, no matter how much time goes by. And I won't say anybody about your age.
I'm 63, actually. And I didn't only come here to get that kiss from Daniela, although you know that would be worth it. But since I went to the Blue, and I also went to the Chico gathering, the inspiration of holistic management has been an inspiration for me since then. I've been working with executive teams and boards in companies. And for me, and I know this is not new to you, but just to tell you how I'm using it, I think a leader needs to set goals for their own grassland, which is their own people in their organization, and say, what do we want? What kind of vitality do we want to see in the people who work for my team or for my organization? I need to go out there and I need to check it every day. Am I getting the vitality that is the goal of my leadership? And so for me, that's been the inspiration that I've taken from holistic management. The other thing is that in the last few years, complexity theory and chaos theory has kind of like swamped everything. So no one's talking about cause and effect anymore. No one's talking about the mechanical systems. They're not talking about leverage. I mean, some people still are. Incentive schemes. How ridiculous to think about some sort of incentive lever that's going to increase the performance of the people. And people are just realizing that a human system, just like any other system, is a complex system. And it needs a holistic approach to it. It needs the ability to see whole. But basically that simple thing of set your goal. Are you getting the results that you're looking for? If you're not, do something different. Keep checking, keep checking. And that is such a simple but very profound thing for us in this complex age. And I'm here because when we heard the conference was coming in here, didn't want to pay the ticket price like all the rest of you. I thought, I'm just going to come along and promise to do some doodles and sneak in. So here I am, and I'm learning again. I mean, the grassroots, who thought, the grassroots is a metaphor, isn't it, for a local community? 15 feet deep into the ground, 24 feet. It changes the way you think about the grassroots. So I've learned a lot, and I was just over there with Richard, and he was just sharing. He's one of the speakers from yesterday, and he said, "Do you know what? A few weeks ago, I was with a group of people. There were 3 or 4 of us in the room, and because we were all sharing our thinking, we all learned a whole lot, and that's what seems to happen here. It's not like in many conferences where you go and people are telling you what they know all the time. You really are coming here to learn from each other." And that has been very exciting for me to see. And we're always looking for opportunities like this to catch great stories, legends in the making. And you're beginning to say, I don't know whether you've been saying this for a long time, because I haven't been around you for 10 years, but you're beginning to really say the time for this idea is here. This is an idea whose time has come. The world has sort of caught up with Allan Savory and with all of you who have been daring to get out there and get the arrows of being pioneers. You're still, the Guardian journalist was saying yesterday apparently, where is the peer review? And they're still skeptical. But the world is changing, it's catching up, and you are really there with very simple, very profound approach. And that's why it's exciting for us to be here and catching it as well as we can on these boards. So thank you for having us. Thank you for giving me a free ticket, and I'll hopefully see you again.
It is our greatest gift, and I don't know how I'm going to take all that back to Boulder, but I promise I will. And when you come see us at the office, I'll be hanging somewhere all over our walls. Thank you, team. Let's get the program rolling.
The concept of holism is critical to understanding holistic management. The concept comes from, could be described by the origin of it, the Greek word holos, which means complete or entire. And that's really what people are managing when they're managing a property or a business. They're managing the whole of the business, the whole of the property. So in an agricultural situation, you're not just managing the front paddock or the back paddock, you're managing the livestock, the humans, the other animals, the microorganisms, you're creating the conditions for those organisms to all interact and to grow. There's a couple of key
things that you need to understand about managing holistically and the concept of holism. And one is that you can't manage parts, so the way to think about the world is to consider yourself as a whole that is part of a greater whole. If you're a farm within a district, within a state, within a nation, within ultimately the planet. So you need to be looking out to study your impact on the greater wholes that are outside you, and to understand the detail you need to then look inwards to the smaller wholes that make up your property, the individual humans, the relationships of animals to each other, and so on. But you're always either looking in or out. A fundamental to that is understanding as well that nature has no clear delineation between wholes. For instance, my skin is a permeable surface. I blend with nature. My skin's not a hard boundary with nature, and that's a clear indication that I'm a whole and that I blend with a larger whole. A leaf on a plant is the same. It's a permeable surface. It breathes and respires, and therefore there isn't a hard boundary with nature. So when you're thinking about managing holistically, you always need to be thinking in terms of the greater whole of which you are a part and look out.
I feel very honoured today to be here honouring Bruce and the Ward family with him. Bruce was an exceptional person, and I want to indicate a bit of that. I never knew him at all. I had been knocked out of the southern African countries because of the opposition to me in several fronts, political, militarily, scientifically. And so I had to operate from the Caribbean. It was no good operating from the Jersey Islands into the UK. I had to operate from the Caribbean to be able to work with the drier parts of the world and into the Americas. And so I was just on my own. And I had to think, now, how do I do this? What's the sensible thing to do? Well, the sensible thing is to bypass Australia. It's too full of bloody Aussies. And they can look after themselves if I can concentrate on the parts of the world that I can, as one little guy struggling on my own there. And then I moved into the United States, set up an office in Texas, and then moved over to Albuquerque because there were thousands of Texans and no Americans in Texas. And I wanted to work America-wide, at least. And then we got going with training and training people, and things were beginning to move. And I got a phone call. Who is this? Bruce Ward. Where are you? Australia. Oh, my God. And he wanted to talk to me because he had to give a talk. And he said he was due to give a talk. He'd read our book, and he didn't know how to answer because everybody said they've never been cattle in Australia. Originally, they only had their marsupials and no hooved animals. And how on earth could he give this talk and explain that you needed animals with hooves? And so I explained briefly that kangaroos leave a track just like kudu or impala or anything else. They have a gut and so on. And in the course of it, I said, look, if you're serious about this, you'll start learning more about it. And he said, well, I am serious. And I said, are you really serious about helping Australia, etc.? He said, yes. Well, I said, well, if you are, you'll show it by your actions. He said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm running workshops here, and if you are serious, you'll get your little butt over here and get to one of these workshops. And my goodness, he arrived pretty quickly too. And I realized, okay, we've got a serious man here. And so that's where our friendship began. Now, to give you an idea of why certainly Jody and I felt such a deep friendship with the family, I need to tell you about one incident. We were due to go over to Australia, and it would be over Christmas time. Bruce and Suzie and the family had their home burnt down. And that's a devastating experience. I've had it once, and I know how devastating it can be when you lose family albums and all sorts of stuff. And friends had rallied around them. It was, as I say, devastating. They were able to move to the home of some friends who weren't in the home, and we talked with them and said, look, we're prepared to go somewhere else, do something else. No, they insisted we stayed, and we actually had a very memorable, wonderful Christmas with them. And it was amazing how they could get themselves above that situation and begin getting on with life. And Suzie, I still remember that. In fact, the last game of tennis I played was with you on that terribly windy day with a storm coming, and if you were serving from this side, you couldn't get the ball on the ground. It just went with the wind. And if you were serving from that side, you couldn't get the ball over the net. I mean, I've never played in a 40-mile wind or whatever it was, but we kept trying to play on that. So it gives you an idea of what they're like. Now, the other thing I'd like to say about Bruce was he was always pushing the envelope. So I could see why he latched onto something like holistic management, pursued it. But in the many talks I had with him over the years, he was constantly pushing the envelope, looking for new ideas. And he was one of the first amongst the ranks of people that we trained that saw the need to get into cities. And we have to, as I spoke earlier, get into the cities. That's where everything, the policies, the power lies, and we've got to stop speaking to the choir. Well, he realized that years ago, and they did move their business to the city, and he made a valiant effort. He didn't have much more success than I've had, so none of us have had real success getting into the cities, but we're going to. But again, he was one of the first to lead that and do so. And so that's the type of person he was, the type of family he has. I've got, as I've got to know them, and I'm terribly glad they're still involved, the family is, and I believe they will be for generations involved with us. So I'd just like us all to remember Bruce, a very special man, and an honor to call him a friend. Thank you. Suzie, I'll come down to your size, Suzie. That's
Allan.
from all of us. With
Thank
much
you.
love.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
I would like to say a few words
Okay.
on that. Wow, that's heavy. Allan, thank you so much for those wonderful words and for acknowledging Bruce. It's an incredibly moving time to be here today, and I really do want to thank you so much. Daniela and team, thank you so much for inviting me, Andrew, David, to this extraordinary and exceptional conference to celebrate putting grasslands to work. Sadly, my son David is unable to be with us here today. Holistic management has come a long way since Bruce and I became involved with it some 20 years ago. It is now what I call mainstream agriculture, and it is regenerating land throughout the world. Our weekly agricultural newspaper, The Land, would confirm this, as now there are success stories of farming families being published in it each week. This did not happen 10 years ago or 20 years ago. Today I want to say a few words about Bruce and how Bruce and I really got involved with Allan and Jody, and the importance of language and the difference between men and women. We left 5 years of agriculture, corporate agriculture in the cotton industry in northern New South Wales, and moved to a town called Moree, which just happened to be the richest shire in Australia at the time. It is not now. Our son David was an agronomist in the cotton industry, and our youngest son Andrew, who is here today, was still at boarding school, some 8 hours away in Sydney. Bruce started his consulting business to the farmers and graziers in the district, and I started a recruitment company and secretarial service. It was during this time that Bruce realised that good people were leaving their properties as the land was no longer able to sustain them. This was a huge realisation, and it led him to the work of Allan Savory. And after reading Allan's first book, many phone calls, many questions, Bruce set off to commence a training program with Allan in New Mexico. And so began his many trips to the US and Zimbabwe. Many of these were done with a fellow Australian and good friend, Brian Marshall. On his return from one of these trips, he commenced his commitment to work with as many people as he could who wanted to learn about this new decision-making process, which included a grazing management process and a really powerful financial process. People and friends were naturally curious as to what we were now doing and came to listen to what Bruce had to say. We had some extraordinary conversations as Bruce started introducing people to new words, and this, of course, got the tongues wagging. People would say to me and to Bruce, "What is this holy stuff about? What is this word biodiversity? We have never heard of it before. What does sustainability mean?" They were convinced we had joined a religious cult. These words are common now. They were not then. However, there were many who just got it, and they asked more questions, liked the answers, and began using the process to change their land, their financial situation, and their family security. This also, I believe, empowered them to control their own lives again, as many were relying on the bank, and this was not empowering. Our circle of friends were spreading all over Australia and New Zealand, and travel was part of our life, and each group we worked with was, in Bruce's opinion, the best ever. He loved what he was doing, and people seemed to love him. However, there is one very important factor that I think you should all understand, and that is the importance of language and the interpretation of the language. I became aware of a book and tapes by a fellow called John Gray. You probably know it. It's called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. Well, the boys and I thought Bruce should listen to these tapes. He was always looking for new material to assist him in understanding how people think and work. And well, after listening to the tapes on one of his many trips to work with a family, he rang me up and he said, "You are from Jupiter," and hung up. Well, I realised then that we had a language and interpretation problem. I realised also that we often got into some very heated discussions over words and thinking, and Bruce worked at a level that he described as the helicopter view. Way up there. Thinking of the bigger picture, and he was able to see things with great vision. I worked on the ground with the how-tos and the practical solutions. So we'd often not see eye to eye about things, and that is when the testing questions would come out and took the heat out of any tongue lashings we might have. And when in doubt, bring out the little card. Bruce, I also discovered, had several meanings for the word yes. This is hard to believe, but in a conversation with him, I would ask him a question and would get yes as a reply. However, that yes could mean, yes, I agree with you, But often it would mean, yes, I acknowledge you've spoken, and I'm thinking about the answer, and then there was silence. I thought he was agreeing with me, but no, that long pause was no. So I would then have to ask him, which yes do you mean? And the answer was often no. So it is no wonder that women and men sometimes do not understand one another. And it was some years before I worked that one out. So take note, all you wives and partners out there. It is true, men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And if you are from Jupiter, well, you are one of the lucky ones. Despite that, we did work well together. We were a balance for one another, and I urge anyone getting involved in training people, you need a good balance of opinion. You need support and a great network of supporters, raging fans and friends. And there's a little bit more, but I can't turn the page. Yes. I would also like to suggest that if anyone thinks I may be able to help answer a query or a concern regarding the practicalities of starting to work with people using holistic management, I'm at the end of the phone or an email and happy to help. So, thank you, Allan and Jodie, for giving us, particularly Bruce, the opportunity to work with you for the last 20 years. It has been an amazing and rewarding life. Bruce was very definitely part of the change that has occurred to so many people's lives, and I am still very proud of him. He was a modest and caring man. Thank you, Allan, for the friendship and knowledge that you shared with our Bruce. At this point, I would like to introduce Tony Lovell. Can't see him. Oh, there, no? Lost him. About 10 years ago, Bruce and Tony had a dream. It has been realised by Tony some 2 years ago, and Bruce knew it was going to happen. Tony has worked tirelessly to ensure it has happened, and I want to acknowledge him today for the long hours of work and thought and travel and hunting dollars that has gone into making the dream a reality. Thank you, Tony, so much from the Ward family. I am sure it has not been easy without your mate beside you. Thank you.
That's all right. No, that's all right. Oh, geez, that's bright. Thanks, Suze. Yeah, Bruce was a magic little bugger, there's no doubt about that. So I've got a few things to cover. I want to do a little bit about Bruce, a little bit about the SLM thing, the transition in the business, a bit about what we're doing, some practical stuff, and then just words of wisdom for Uncle Tony. So if we cover that. Bruce, three things about Bruce. 60th birthday, the boys organised a... I rang around people and just said, can you just write a few words about Bruce? I want to put a little book together about Bruce. Okay, so you've got this book from all these people who've known Bruce for a very long time. Presented the book to Bruce and got a very less than expected result from Bruce, because the theme that kept coming through from almost everybody who knew Bruce was, he's such a nice man. He's such a nice man. And Bruce hated being such a nice man. But having said that, as Sue said, that every group that he ever worked with was the best group of people, great group of people, great group of people. In all the time I knew him, there was only two people who he described in anything other than glowing terms, and I don't know what they did to him, but it must have been nasty. It must have been bad. Okay. So when Bruce was passing, he got... so we looked at the properties, we looked at a lot of places together, and part of Padua Park, a Savannah-type area, was a bit that was his happy place. And so David came out and took some footage, etc. And when Bruce had died and was cremated, we were very fortunate that he wanted to have some of his ashes spread. So the essence of Bruce lives on our property, which is, I think, helping it work a lot. I was in I'd left and I spoke to him the last time, and at that stage it turned out that there was 2 types of cancer, and the treatment for type A was upsetting type B, and the treatment for type B was upsetting type A, and so it was not looking good. I got to London, and about a day or so later Bruce had died. In the meantime, the way I found out was I got an email from Bruce, and it was Monty Python-esque. It was like it was written by the Monty Python team. It was, "Dear sir, I must apologise most profusely for the inconvenience that my demise will cause your business." I'm going, what? It was a strange little email, but that was Bruce. This is on Padua Park, and when David had gone around looking at, and David, his son, is working for us, which is fantastic. David had gone around and found this little piece of country, and sitting on a stump was somebody had done years ago a little koala painting that had the words "care for a piece of paradise," which indicates that for a long time this has been pretty special. So if we just, do I do that? Yeah. So Mark Stevenson, who you'll meet this afternoon, who spent a week with Bruce and I, and before he wrote his book, and described it as I think Bruce's influence here, the best week of his life, which we find a lot, wrote these words for Bruce, and that's sitting down in the middle of Padua Park. So it'll take off shortly with one of those little drones that are a great piece of gear. And what you've got is, it's the end of, it's flood out country, so it's the Warrego River runs out in a big flood, and down the bottom of it these areas fill up, and there's a big tree in the middle which is a coolabah tree, which has got to be 350 or 400 years old, and it is enormous. And on the branches of that tree you'll see sitting up in the middle is probably 50 or 60 bird nests. So at the right time, this place must be incredibly alive. So what we've done is we've fenced off about 100 acres around it. We're going to run water into it. People have said, so you're fencing off to keep the livestock out, and I said that would be totally disrespectful for Bruce. We have fenced it off with the intention of beating the crap out of it with livestock on a regular basis, and just see what happens. So it'll be quite interesting. So that little area sitting here, we just got the bulldozer to dig out, and the idea is we'll just fill that up, and there's little bird nests and roosts, and we'll try and keep the thing going a bit. So that's that part of it. So that's Brucey. Okay. As Suzie mentioned before, Bruce had led a fairly charmed life through to about 2001 when he moved into Sydney. And into every life a little rain must fall, so I rang him in about 2001 and started talking to him, and I'd found out about the holistic management book. It made sense to me at a business level as well as a farm level, so I grew up on a farm, and for my sins I'm a chartered accountant as well, so the whole thing sort of made sense. And when I rang Bruce, he'd just moved to Sydney with the intention to try to do the transition to the city, and I was in the city trying to understand how to explain it to clients. We started working along, just starting talking. I did a couple of a course with Bruce, and that started the annoying by Tony process that continued for about a decade. Allan spoke at a conference in Armidale in 2003, 2004. And at the end of the conference, the keynote speech was, if you think this stuff's important, if you think it matters, if you think it needs to be done, get off your bum and go and do something about it. So I sent an email to Bruce, 13th of April 2004, and said, this is what I think we need to do, this is the size, this is the scale, this is the way the program works. I can do all the other bits and pieces of it, but I need some assistance with the holistic management, that actual implementation bit, and I'd like to hire you to do it. Bruce, in about a second, said, how about we do it as a joint venture instead of a contract? And sometimes you make a good decision, and very quickly I just said yes, and that's where we started. So over the next period of time, I was thinking about it yesterday when Joel was speaking and other people were speaking about it, and it's almost at one level that we're talking about a bottom-up approach. So we're building little family farms and little family business, and we're making all these little bits and pieces. Okay, and I'd sort of looked at the thing and said, well, maybe we just do the same stuff, but with more zeros on the end of it. So we've got millions of acres and billions of acres that need to be healed, and we can do that 2 ways, and they're not exclusive. We can do that lots of little pieces at a time, or we can go and take great big chunks. Okay, so Joel was talking about nooks and crannies. And on his properties, in some properties, nooks and crannies are small. On a lot of the properties we're looking at, nooks and crannies are 5,000 and 10,000 acre pieces. Okay, so there's chunks in there. Joel mentioned about getting money from the city to the bush. Okay, and doing that by somebody giving you a $100 bill at a time. And my sort of thinking was maybe we should get somebody to give us $100 million at a time. So it's basically the same stuff with zeros. So what I'll do is this is SLM the business. So we'll just have a look at what we're doing, what the approach is, and some practical stuff. So people in here, speak slower. I am speaking slowly. You should be on the inside. This is painful. Okay, I know, sorry. I shall now enunciate my words with more care. Thank you, Daniela. I want to just cover the fact, just a little bit of I did ask Daniela how long have I got, and Daniela does Bruce's thing as well. So have I got 20 minutes, 30 minutes or 40 minutes? And I got yes and no to each of those times. Go. I'm just going to keep going, that's fine. Okay. All right, so the idea of SLM is it's exactly the point that there needs to get money from the city back into the bush. Okay, the flow's gone the wrong way. It's exactly what Joel was saying, just done differently. So the money was going the wrong direction. In a lot of cases, we've got exactly the same situation in Australia. We have an ageing population of farmers. We have people where we haven't romanced them back onto the land. We've got a gap. So the properties that we've been buying, we bought properties from people in their 60s and in their 70s, and we bought a property from an 84-year-old man and his 82-year-old wife who were still actively running the property. Okay, now if your kids haven't come home by then, they're not coming home. Okay, so you have a lack of social capital, you have a lack of financial capital, you have a lack of ecological capital. Okay, that group of people are not going to get the financial capital together. Okay, somebody needs to do that. That group of people at this stage haven't got the emotional capital to start to heal the ecological capital. Okay, so there's a process that we can bring to the table with that. Okay. The social capital is still there. So in a lot of cases what you'll have is sort of our target for managers for our property are almost a second son. So where the eldest son's inherited the property and the second son, what do I do? Okay, so there's an opportunity, there's a passion, there's an interest, there's an enthusiasm, but there's a gap. So it's a case of trying to fill that gap. So the idea of the SLM program is to raise a couple of $100 million, to buy a couple of million acres, to run a couple of 100,000 cows, to do this stuff with zeros. Okay, and that's what we've done at this stage. So at this point we've got $100 million under management, we've got about 1.2 million acres under management, there's 15,000 cattle on the place at the moment. We started in June 2012, bought the first property in December 2012, did the infrastructure in June 2013. So what you'll see here is the property Padua Park and Green Hills. This is sort of the proving ground, okay? And the stuff works. Okay, so if anyone's got some doubts about it, it works. Okay. All right, so Padua is our first developed property, provides proof of concept from the investor's point of view, okay? Aggregation of 2 properties totalling about 43,000 hectares, 110,000 acres, cost about $10 million to buy. The development, the water, the fencing, cattle yards, motorbikes, buggies, 4-wheel, it's about another $2.5 million. Okay. So there's 4,000 properly managed cattle wandering around on the place for a change. Stocking, it was also one of the driest years, so we were very, very fortunate that the gods did smile on us. And rather than getting soft on us and starting in a very nice season, we actually started in one of the driest in the last 120 years. So it was, let's see whether or not you can harden up, slow down more. Okay. Okay. Yeah, it's not hard. Come on, people, it's not me, it's you, pick up. Can you people listen quicker? Okay. All right, so we brought through basically 50% more cattle, more animals on the place during one of the driest years than conventionally, and we didn't buy any hay and we didn't buy any grain and we didn't buy anything, we just used what was there. There were a couple of times when the girls were a bit upset, but they worked through it, which was fine. Animals are performing well, positive environmental impacts. There's enough grass on the property in front of us to take us through till Christmas, which gives you, you need to have those buffers, you need to have that cover in front. That's where we're operating. So some of the aspects, for example, people who are talking here in London and you've got a farm 300 acres and it's an hour out of London, well, you've got 20 million people on your doorstep, and where Joel is in Virginia, you've got Washington not far away. So there's things you can do there, and you can do aspects of it. Where we are, we're 900 to 1,000 kilometres away from capital cities. Okay, so we can't do chicken tractors and we can't do a lot of vertical stuff. We have to head in a different direction. We have to approach it differently. But that's the range of country we've got. So there's from some fairly hard, hungry country that costs $15 an acre through to some stuff that's $150 an acre. So there's a range of properties, there's a range of approaches. So what you'll see with the infrastructure we're doing on Padua, the concepts stay consistent, the physical way we'll actually do things varies. Okay? So have a look at what the place looked like beforehand. Be warned, there's some horrible shots in here, some horrible scenes to come. That's one of them. So that's the front entrance of Padua. Just the idea of the property, it looks okay. That's the homestead. So it's giving you an idea there was reasonable infrastructure, it wasn't run down. People were able to make money off this country anyway, the way it was managed, so it's not devastated. You can see it's big, it's open, it's flat, it's easy to manage. So from our point of view, that's very important to us. There's not much point having a lot of scale if it's on the side of a cliff. Okay. Big open grasslands, so that's, all of that's us, and a bit the other way. It's got flooding country and then it's got little sandy ridges, so there's lots of variation. There's an incredible amount of biodiversity on there, which is great. We have underground water, so we don't do any irrigation obviously, but that's the Great Artesian Basin. So that water flows out of a borehole 600 metres down, 8 litres a second, just keeps coming. Okay, so it's a fantastic resource which up until now has been used a little inappropriately. So that was the infrastructure that was on the place. You've got a little concrete trough that's broken. You've got what they call a bore drain. This country's tabletop flat, like it drops a foot every mile. It's just, and the way they used to distribute the water, again, before they had polypipe, before they had everything, was basically putting a ditch in. Now, the end of that ditch might be 80 miles or 60, 70 miles away from the start. So in summer, the water at the end is not particularly palatable. Okay. This is a little bit of the thinking. So this is our scale of our nooks and crannies. That's the property. So that's a road down here. So all that's in there is basically Padua Park and Green Hills. Okay, so all I've done is, the wiggle line down the middle is a bore drain. It's one of those snaky bits of water, and then the other things are those little troughs. So it's where water was for cattle, and we just GPS points, and then we just draw a circle, 2 kilometre circle around it. Cattle will walk about 2 kilometres to water. They don't want to walk much further than that. So what you end up with is the areas next to water being flogged out, and then nothing, and then nothing, and then you get 3 kilometres away and nobody's using any of the country. So on this property, there was probably a third of it that was too far away from water and rarely, if ever, got grazed, except by desperately hungry cattle. Paddock sizes. Okay. Conventional agriculture, conventional grazing management can be simply described as a small number of animals in a very large area for a very long period of time. What we're doing is we put a larger number of animals in a smaller area for a shorter period of time. That's a very simple part. The subtlety is we get to define larger, smaller and shorter, and we get to change it every day. But to do that, you've got to have some starting point, you've got to have some infrastructure. So what you've got here, if you look at the block on the left, that was the Green Hills property. That was 36,000 acres without an internal fence. Okay? There's not much you can do with that. That's the sort of cattle handling facilities, which is okay if you're doing 50 cows. It's not real good if you're doing 5,000. You're very tired. So what did we do? Okay. Remember, that was the paddock sizes, that was the shape of the thing and where the water was. That's what it looks like now. Okay, so we put 100 kilometres of pipe in, we put 600 kilometres of fencing in, we've taken it from 18 paddocks to 240 paddocks. There's water around the place. That is actually the grazing plan, to show you an idea. We process the cattle in this set of cattle yards in March. We wanted to process them in that set of cattle yards in June. Okay, so you do some, people go, oh, it's going to take so much labour to move all these cows. You've got to move cows all the time. You've got helicopters and dogs and motorbikes and blah, 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 blah. And you just go, okay, well, if I want to process the cows in the cattle yards on the 16th of June, which paddock should they be in on the 15th of June? Tricky question. Okay, and if that one on the 15th, where should they be? You just work backwards. So you can see the numbers, tick, 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 tick. Okay? It's not totally formulaic, but at the scale we're doing, we have to have some discipline. Okay. That's just some of the gear going in. So put it in once, do it right. So while there's, if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing well versus worth doing poorly. What I decided to do was we do it well because we got enough examples and with Bruce's experience of what doing poorly was, and we knew what to do well was because somebody else had already done it poorly. So we tried to avoid that step, which is good. That just gives you an idea of the size of the pipe that we put in versus the size of the pipe that was there before. So we can now actually push some water around. And we've got 2 of those pipes going out, not just one. Instead of one simple little pump, we've got 4 pumps. They're computer controlled. They connect together. If there's a problem, they call the mobile phone of the manager. The pump rings the phone of the manager and says, I'm in trouble, and he goes out and fixes it. Those are our water points. So they're a thing called a cup and saucer, a concrete trough at the base, tank in the middle of it. We can water comfortably 5,000 cattle around those. Okay, so you don't need a hell of a lot. You need flow and capacity, not volumes of the things. That just shows you the fencing infrastructure. So basically it's a single wire electric fence. There's a post every 50 metres. Okay, you can put up a kilometre in an hour. We can fence a water point in 2 days and just keep going. So it's a nice steady rhythm to it. We use these little electric bungees instead of gates. That heading out there into the distance is one of the fence lines. So they become very unobtrusive. We don't have problems with kangaroos. If you don't have it too tight and you don't worry too much and the animals aren't under pressure, they don't get taken out by kangaroos and emus. We've put up 600 kilometres of fencing with a post every 40 metres. That's a lot of posts, that's a lot of insulators. We've replaced a dozen in 18 months. Okay, so. Set of cattle yards. That's the cattle crush that we've got now, which is a hydraulic crush, so it's better for the cattle, it's better for the staff, it's better to process. So we can put 800 to 1,000 animals a day through nice and steadily, and it's not a case of just getting them through quickly for getting them through quickly. It's while over there in the yards, they're not eating grass, they're not doing what they want to do. So there's a balance on that. In terms of just the control of the process, we have in Australia a National Livestock Identification Scheme. That little round button has got a radio frequency tag in it, which is unique for every one of those. That goes in one ear of the cow, our visual identification goes in the other. She comes through, we scan her, we weigh her, we put a description of her in there. We record whether she's pregnant or not, whether she had the calf, how heavy the calf. There's a lot of data comes out of it. And you start to improve your genetics, you get much, much better control over the herd. Grazing management, what have we done? That's now small trucks for us because everything scales up a bit, so they're bigger than that. There's the first lot of cattle turning up. That's our happy cows. So you can see basically the herd there and around the water point. So they're just coming up to move through a water point. Okay, so that's the sort of scale it's working at. That's the electric fencing. People say they won't stay behind a single wire electric fence. The people who say that have never touched a single wire electric fence. Okay, you stay behind one. Okay. And again, that's the girl, they're just waiting patiently, they know what's happening. Most times fencing is really, really tough, and it needs to be tough because the animals want to be on the other side. The grass is always greener, and usually the grass is. With this process, the grass is the same, and they know they'll move anyway, so that's just showing how calm the cattle get. So that's just at the water point, that's Graham's shadow on one of the cows, that's just, you know. And if they're calm and they're relaxed and they're happy, then everything's working nicely. Okay, we did this video. I thought, I'm not sure how many people here actually operate cattle, work with cattle, etc., etc. We'll just see what happens. So all we did was a little drone, which is a really cool piece of gear. We've got to get one. And a little GoPro camera, and we just recorded a move of the cattle through a water point. To give you some perspective on the scale of the thing, this country is considered to run a cow to every 40 to 50 acres. So these paddocks are about 500-acre paddocks. So cattle are coming through from one 500-acre paddock to another 500-acre paddock. 1,000 acres, you'd normally run 20 or 30 cows in there. As you'll see, we might have a few more. So the bulls are in at the moment, so we've got a controlled join, just a 6-week join, so up we go. That's the water point. Don't expect green verdant grass, this is Australia. Okay. We do get green at times, but not at the moment. So. So instead of 20 or 30, there's 4,500. Okay, 4,500 cows, there's 36 camels and 32 donkeys in there. This paddock in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that's the one, see the difference in colour, that's where they were the day before. They've then moved through into that one, and you can just see at the back the difference in colour, that's the impact of them. Okay, so these paddocks, the cattle have been brought in there, that goes actually 2.5 kilometres out the back, so there's plenty of space, they're in a 500-acre paddock. But watch them move through and see there's a cow there still grazing, so everything's going past, she's come through the water point, she's put her head down, she's eating. Okay, if everything's working right, they're not rushing out the back, they're not stressing. The only reason they start getting moved further out is because these guys want to come through and there's a bit of pressure to move. But you see here the camels start to come down. Okay, so they're cool, they're great. But the cattle give them space. Now watch at the water point, see how everything's flowing through. The cattle come through in the fast lane. Okay. See the cows don't speed up? The camels have gone through like this and the cattle have just let them go. And then once you get at the other end of it, there's cows stopped and grazing. The whole thing's happening, so they're moving through. It's almost like fluid flowing. Back up here, these cows will be there until the end. Okay, so they work into it. There's a whole social structure that happens that's really cool to watch. So the lead is always the lead, the tail is always the tail. There are cows that walk to the back of the paddock, there are cows that like the front of the paddock. So the diversity thing, a cow's not a cow. Cows are expressing their cowishness, or count, whatever it is. So here they go through it, and see how they're spreading nicely? Okay. So that's the animals flowing through, that's just the nice steady rhythm. Those are the paddocks they're still to graze, and these ones here, so. Now, when I said about if we wanted to split the herd, if we wanted to make it different, all I've got to do is walk in there, close that gate and put half the herd in here, and I've changed the impact dramatically in one move. I can take a third of the herd that way, I could take 10% of the herd that way. So it's not every day the same. The structure that we've got, the infrastructure is consistent. How we use the infrastructure is a smart part of it, and that's where the secret sauce, the herbs and spices are in that. That's me just standing there. Now, if you watch, the cattle are all doing what most things do, which is give me a wide berth. But, and then one cow, she just trots off and everything's happy. So, see this little one? I'm facing, she came up to have a look. And then after a while she decides, oh no, and off she bounces. Okay, she doesn't just walk off, she just, oh, okay, that'll do. That cow going back, she's lost a calf bellowing. Yeah? You're supposed to be with me. So she's gone back, she's come through and she's gone, whoops, I forgot something. That's what you want. You want that mothering instinct. You want the herding instinct. We've got to rebuild a lot of that because that's gone as well. But fence line to fence line. They haven't come through and gone in one direction. They've gone through and just spread beautifully. That's those last couple of cows still coming through. And these little ones, there's always a few that pop through the fence. The interesting thing is when they pop through the fence, when you start to move, they want to pop back in again. So they're not trying to get out of the fence, they're trying to come back to the herd every time, and that's just them spreading. So we've finished the move, they've moved at the speed they wanted, and they're already best part of a kilometre out from the water point, spread nicely from one side to the other. Okay? And that's our little process. So that horrible, strenuous process. So we have to endure that on a daily basis, but somebody's got to do it. Go back into our... Okay, cool. Why do we have camels? Okay, two reasons. Main reason, camels are really cool animals. They're fantastic. No, they're one of the few animals that when you're looking at the bum of them, they can turn around and look at you. So you get this... That's basically biodiversity. So see where they're grazing? The bottom of that is the height a cow can get to. So the cows have trimmed sort of up to that, but they can't get past it. So the camels do that part of it. Very quickly, the cattle work out, oh, hang on, they'll drop some feed here. And we've actually had cows mug camels for feed. I had 4 cows stand around, and then when the camels pull a tree down, the cows will chase the camel away to grab the thing. Biodiversity is one of the things that Bruce always said, biodiversity is very, very important. So we've got biodiversity in our animals, we need to have biodiversity in our staff. So that's our mustering crew heading out with... So there's a bit of variety in there. Graham Finlayson and the guy in the middle, Stacey Brown on the left, and Will Gray, a visitor from Manchester, on the right. So that's cool. Okay, what's the impact? All right, so the couple of things we need to have is what's happening on the ground and what's happening financially. So we'll look at both of those. Top left-hand corner, under conventional management, perennial grassplants are about 1 metre apart. Plenty of space to fill in the gaps. Okay. Top right-hand corner, 9 days after a grazing, okay, each one of those little yellow dots is a new grassplant. There's 100 in a square metre. People say you must have to plant seeds, you must have to do something. They're there waiting. Bottom left-hand corner is that same spot 3 weeks later. That looks a little bit better. And the bottom right-hand corner is just the size that we can get green grass at times. Photo, in the water bottle is on the same post. Top left-hand photo is looking over into the neighbour's property. The bottom photo is onto our place on the same day. Okay, they are seriously right next to each other. Talking to the guys there, we had already at that stage in the previous 12 months taken out twice as many days of feed as he had, okay, and we put another 4,000 cows through there 2 days later. So in 12 months we took 3 times, and that's our first run through. So this stuff is pretty cool. That's at an individual grass plant level. So the plant on the left-hand side would be, say, at that end of this table. There's a fence in the middle, and then here. They are no more than 10 metres apart. And that's exactly the same species of plant under exactly the same growing conditions, on the same day, everything else is the same. If you look at the total amount of biomass, the health, the vigour, and multiply that, one of those every square metre on 43,000 hectares, that's a lot of plant. Judy Earle, who's a friend of the HM group, she's an independent PhD, she does a lot of monitoring. We had her duty in to do independent monitoring in April 2013, April 2014. We've had double the number of species, increase in biodiversity. Okay, that's fantastic. So there's more things doing things. We've got lots more employees than this year than we had last year. Okay, some basic things: ground cover. What percentage of the property is covered by plants instead of bare ground's gone from 18%. It's doubled to 30%, almost 40%. Bare ground's dropped from 42% to 37% in one grazing, and the leaf litter, the dry stuff has really gone back into the ground. So this is what Allan and everyone's talking about, the whole speed of the cycle, everything's starting to kick, everything's starting to get active, which is great. Performance data. At the end of the day, we have to produce a return. I don't think, the way that we pitch to investors is, this stuff makes money anyway. It's not pitching it from the perspective that, look, it's wonderful for the ecosystem, it's wonderful for people, it's wonderful for the planet. We have to do all these things. By the way, you can make some money. We flip that around. If the stuff works properly, it should make money. Now, if it makes good money, and it doesn't need to be ridiculous figures, what you've then got is all the biological stuff, all the ecological stuff, all the increase in resilience, all of those factors actually decrease the risk. So it decreases the volatility, so they can actually accept a lower return. You just need to package the thing. So it's an add-on rather than the core factor. Long-term conventional stocking rate in that area, that property would run about 2,500 livestock units. Okay? During the last 12 months, those are our actual numbers. We've averaged about 3,750. So we've averaged 50% above the long-term average, and the long-term average is good seasons, bad seasons, it's average. We've done that in one of the driest years in the last 120. Okay, so it's a fair sort of a test on it. That's our rolling rainfall, our 12-month rolling rainfall. Our long-term average rainfall is 377 mils. Okay, we got down to 161, which is pretty tight. Okay, we then got a little bit of rain, and we got a week of 48, 49, and 50-degree days. Okay, which didn't help. If we do adjusted to animal days per 100 mils of rain, so let's come back to a rainfall adjusted, we're actually double, better than double, okay, in the very first year. And there's a long way to go. Because we can weigh individual cattle, because we've got the ear tags and the identification, we know what happened. So we can go through and say, these were the cows that we processed in March, this is what they weighed. These are the cows that we processed in June, this is what they weighed, and we can do the difference. And the maths is pretty simple. There's 274,000 kilos of beef at an average price of $1.55, $1.60, produced during that period in 90 days, and it didn't cost us that much to run. Okay, so you can see the numbers dropping out of it. The average daily gain was about 0.75 of a kilo off grass. That's pretty good. That's cows, calves, that's everything. That's across the entire herd. We had some cattle put on 120 kilos in 90 days off a straight grass program, and it wasn't really flash grass. Okay, what have we got? So experience shows it works on Padua, and happy cows are profitable cows. Okay, so that's just the idea. That was just some practical stuff as to what we're doing, and that's how it works on this particular property with our particular fund. That's the first property that we've got up and running. The others are all rolling. The development is kicking through. Oh, sorry. That bit just says that if anyone has any questions, we've never seen you, and we don't know any person in this room. Okay, sorry. You can, sir. You just.
When the cattle were moving to the next paddock, you said sometimes you choose to split them.
I'm saying sometimes we could. We could, yeah.
Okay. I was just going to ask about, because you'd already mentioned the social hierarchies, arrangements they have.
Yeah.
Their own structures, family structures, whatever. So if you divide them, you're going to upset.
They all come through in the same thing, so you're only going to get a couple. Yeah. And they get over it pretty quickly.
Okay. I'm asking questions and
Yeah.
another one.
Okay, we'll do it later, because I just got one more thing I want to cover, which is a bit of channeling Bruce. This will go quickly. Relax. Okay. Traps for young players. All I wanted to cover here is, having spent a lot of time with Bruce and annoying him relentlessly, what works, what doesn't, how do you get people converted, who turns up to the courses, which ones take the stuff on, which ones don't, why don't you get... Just keep going. So what we've got here is a lot of people who are going to get all enthusiastic and passionate and go out and want to start changing the world, okay? And we've had that for the last 20, 30, 40 years, and it sort of... There's some things that we need to understand in there, I think, okay? We're talking about change, okay? We're changing, from Alan's point of view, the whole way we think about things. From Joel's point of view, changing, we're thinking about expanding horizontally, expanding vertically. Elaine Ingham changed my concept of sticky bacteria yesterday. So we just do some change here. So this gets a bit interactive. Okay, so what I'd like to do, I think one of the first steps in making the world a better place is if everyone could just listen to it and do exactly what I say for the next few minutes. Everyone stand up, okay? Pair off with somebody, okay? And look at the person, okay? You are going to have to identify this person in a police lineup very shortly. Look at their appearance, see what they're doing, note the person. You could describe them, you can pick them out of a lineup, okay? Turn away from the person. All right, now you turn away from that person, now make one change to your appearance. Take off your glasses, take off your hat, put your scarf on back, something. Make one change to your appearance. Okay, all right? Turn back and look at the person. Identify the change. Everyone's got the change? Okay, cool. All right. Okay. All right. Now I want you to, okay. Come on, kiddies. Now turn away from the person again. Turn away from the person. Make 4 more changes to your appearance. 4 more changes to your appearance. Come on. Okay. Preferably stop short of nudity. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn back. All right. Note the 4 changes. Note all the changes you've done. Okay. Very good. Okay. Now everybody sit down. Okay, everybody sit down again. All right. Okay. All right, everybody sit down, sit down, sit down. Yep, that's it, sit down. Okay. Okay, now, at this point, a couple of things we need to realise. First thing is, I promised to run a benevolent dictatorship, but you people make it very, very difficult. I gave simple, clear instructions. I said, do exactly what I said. Who said put everything back? Okay, nobody said put everything back. So what did we learn out of that? We learned that in things with change, a little change is easy. The first one was easy. Okay? A lot of change is hard, and given a chance, you go straight back to where you were. Okay? And everyone did it. Now, there's a Chris Christopherson song that has a line in it, a longing for the freedom of my chains. Okay, so it's where you're comfortable, where you're comfortable. We're talking about change. All right, communication. We've got to communicate this to people. All right, so this is the thing we need to go out and we need to communicate to people. A few things about communication. Okay, the biggest single problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. All right, so just be aware of that. A conversation has 2 parts. When you're in a conversation with somebody, you've got 2 parts, 2 roles, aren't they? What are the 2 roles? Well, there's talking and there's listening. Okay? Too often the 2 roles that people are in a conversation are talking and waiting to talk. Okay? How many times have you had that happen? Oh, sorry, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours? Okay, so people, this is not us, obviously, I'm talking about other people here, but this is what can happen to you. All right, Eli Goldratt was a little Israeli physicist, a clever little fellow who said, in physics there is no conflict. Okay, so if you've got a conflict, something's gone wrong. And the thing is, first one, get your definitions right. Make sure you're talking about the same thing. Okay, Susie's yes doesn't necessarily mean yes. So first thing, get your definitions right. And second thing, challenge your basic assumptions. A lot of Alan's work is around challenging your basic assumptions. Joel's it's challenging all the time. Okay, so that's the thing. What we've got is a hell of a lot of information we've had. We've got fantastic new information. We now know stuff that we didn't know, And we're sure that the people who don't understand this stuff would just understand this stuff if they knew the stuff that we know. And we just got to tell them the stuff that we know because it's such good stuff. Okay, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that facts don't necessarily have the power to change people's minds. In fact, quite the opposite. Okay? When misinformed people, particularly political partisans, and there's some politics around this whole conversation, were exposed to corrected facts and news stories, they rarely change their minds. In fact, they often became even more strongly set in their beliefs. Facts were not curing misinformation. Like an underpowered antibiotic, facts could actually make misinformation stronger. It could worsen the situation. So just simply going out there and telling people, did you know that, won't work. Okay? Peter Bagassian, as he says, is that the beliefs most people hold are not tethered to reality. They're not checked. And Eli Goldratt's one is that anyone who thinks they can use logic to counter emotion has never been married. Now, any wives whose husbands have gone and got the Harley know that one. So it's not just a male thing. Okay. All right, so we'll play a game I call Spaces and Ladders. Okay, so highest mountain, and this is interactive, highest mountain in the world is? Everest. Second highest? Third highest? We're in trouble. Okay, longest river in the world? Yeah, maybe. Second longest? Third longest? Not too sure, okay. What's a plumber do? Okay, we know what that does. Okay, what's a lawyer do? We know what that does. Okay, what's a chef do? We know those stuff, okay. Our storage capacity is limited and most of the spaces are already filled. So we've got something in our head for most things and we haven't got much depth on it. We know, but we already know what that is. So once we know what that is, we don't need to unknow it, we just know what it is. So guys at a conference with came out with this in the morning, that it's more important to create the space to be filled than it is to fill the space. Okay, so we've got a process where we need to create a space to be filled. George Lakoff, there's some really interesting work by George Lakoff on framing. So every conversation happens within a frame, and if you try and do facts, they don't work unless you understand the frame the person's coming from. And so there's a lot of stuff in politics around it. So you need to have the frame right. Okay? Words have meanings. Okay? So the words you use have meanings because people have that meaning in their head to start with. So again, we're following on the principle before, which is we're doing exactly what Tony says. So all I want you to do now is do this and don't do anything else, okay? Don't think of an elephant. Okay? Don't just that's one thing, just don't think of an elephant. Okay? So as soon as you say don't think of an elephant, what do you think of? Elephant. Okay? So calling up the negative of something still calls up the thing. Okay? So it's already in there. Livestock is a space in people's head. People already know what livestock is. They know what livestock is. So when you start talking to them about livestock in a different way, they already have that in their head. The risk we run is we start giving them more facts. And the more facts don't go in the direction we want, it takes them the other direction. Okay? So we need to create a new space. Okay? So we need to create a space in their head that isn't there at the moment. That's where properly managed, you've seen properly managed livestock is one of the things that Savory are now talking about. And you saw that I made sure I put properly managed livestock in the presentation. Okay? So the idea is it's something different. First point, okay, that's what I covered with Bruce, is don't answer a question you haven't been asked yet. Think about the number of times when you're talking to somebody and somebody says something but they haven't asked you a question, okay? Second thing is reframe the discussion. All right, so I think of the two steps. So come back to don't answer a question you haven't been asked yet. Somebody in a conversation with you says, eating meat's bad, or cows are worse than cars for climate change, or it takes a swimming pool of water to produce a pound of beef, okay? And you're all sitting there going, I know that's not right, I know stuff, okay? Right, so the risk you run is that when they come out with that, what are you going to do? They haven't asked you a question, okay? So you don't have to answer anything, okay? You don't have to at this point. They've made a statement, it's up to them to support their statement. You don't have to pull their statement apart. That's not the rules, okay? So when somebody comes out with a statement like that, and you know it's completely wrong, what do you do? Okay, there's a couple of things you can do. One of the first things you can do okay? It'll only take seconds. When you do that, I've never had anybody, count to yourself, okay? You won't get past 10 seconds. People can't stand silence, so they'll say something. And at that point, they've got to defend themselves. So just simply do nothing, okay? But do count to yourself, otherwise you're going to break it. So it's like a game of chicken, whoever blinks. But just allow the space. Or say something non-threatening, okay? Now, surprisingly, my experience has been that when somebody comes out with a statement like that and you go, you idiot, it doesn't go well. So say something like, that seems like an awful lot of water, I wonder how they worked that out. How would somebody know that was true? Not how do you know that's true, which is confrontational. How would somebody know that's true? And what you'll find, you'll often reveal that they don't know. They just heard it somewhere and they parrot it. Okay? So they've seen it in the press. Okay? We only use 10% of our brain. How many people have heard that? How many people have said that? How many people have even thought about whether or not that makes sense? Okay? But it keeps parroted, sorry? Yeah, how many? Okay. So what you say, so are you talking about livestock or properly managed livestock? Now, as soon as you say it's talking about livestock or properly managed livestock, you're going to get, I think, one or two responses. You're going to get, what's the difference, or what do you mean by properly managed livestock? Now, the point at which you get that question, what does it tell you? New space. They haven't got that filled in already, okay? So there's a gap, we've got success, okay? So we're now allowed to fill that with some information. Use a teaspoon, not a shovel, okay? Just little bits. Work out what works for you. Pick one or two things that you're comfortable with and just, by the way, but just take it steadily. So the first thing is you've got to create the space to be filled, and once you've created the space, and I think the way to create the space is by giving them a different something. Livestock versus properly managed livestock, huh? Okay, and that's when the question comes in. That's what I think the important part of it is. Okay, so properly managed cows are happy cows. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. That was super inspiring. The psychology, and there's numbers with it, and I'm going to carry the aerial footage with me for some time. So, quick logistics for the rest of the morning so that we all know what the lay of the land is. For the next hour or so, we've got two speakers sharing this connection between the land that Tony was speaking to and the approach that we are all taking to money and investing, and what is that intersection. After that, we'll have a short break and then come back with a question of how to take this message of regeneration and share it with people, broad masses of people. What does that look like, feel like? And then we'll break for lunch. So it is my pleasure to introduce Hunter Lovins for our next speaker. As a bit of background, she's been on the ground floor of the environmental movement as it's modernly standing. I was in a conversation with her earlier, and she was sharing with me being in a meeting at 3 a.m. the night before the final negotiation of the Kyoto Protocol was ratified, and being part of that process, and I just found myself so inspired. She's written 14 books on the subject of sustainability. Last year she was named a Millennial Hero by Time Magazine, and right now she is the founder and runs a consultancy called Natural Capital Solutions, which focuses on working with some of the largest companies in the world to figure out what their sustainability plans are. Hunter, thank you for joining us.
Give me 1 sec to play with the technology. Yeehaw. We know this. Humanity is standing on an edge. And most of the people in the world now are watching the system unravel. Certainly people in rural communities. Dr. Johan Rockström at Stockholm Resilience and a team of scientists looked at the planetary boundaries. And they found we've exceeded 3 of them: climate change, the nitrogen cycle, the loss of biodiversity. And we're at risk of exceeding a number of others. Kate Raworth, up at Oxford, has shown that there are inner edges as well of the minimums that humans need. And we aren't even making those minimums. This is the if you will, the social capital. Global Biodiversity Outlook 3. Again, science from a lot of scientists around the world. We're in the 6th great extinction. We're losing species faster now than at any time since the dinosaurs disappeared. And hitting these tipping points. Coral reefs. Sorry, scuba divers, business as usual, perhaps as early as 2030, there will be no living coral reefs on planet Earth. The Amazon. And the oceans are acidifying. Now, the problem here is that the little phytoplankton who will no longer be able to build the calciferous shells provide about half the oxygen that we use. If you really want to scare yourself, go check out a strain of thinking called near-term human extinction, in which some scientists, Dr. Jim Lovelock here in the UK, and a number of others are saying human extinction by 2050. Now, this was a bad day when I discovered this stuff. So I asked Dr. Kevin Noonan, who works with Rockstrom, I said, do you believe this? And we talked about it a bit. He said, no, on average, I don't think that soon. But if we don't turn it around, yeah. Climate change. In the 80s, $1 billion storm per year. In the 90s, 2 such storms. In the aughts, $5 billion storms per year. 2011, a new record, $14 billion storms, and 2013 was the 6th year in a row with weather damages over $10 billion, and this is just in the United States. And we're seeing it worldwide, the largest typhoon ever to make landfall last year. Remember, it was a food riot in Tunisia that kicked off the Arab Spring, which now has spread to the creation of a group in Syria and Iraq calling for a caliphate. A food riot kicked this off. Tom Friedman's written how the climate change in Syria, the loss of the agricultural productivity, is what drove the Syrian revolution. And if you look at these big drivers, the precarious food situation, food and water scarcity, the world around, 33 countries, World Bank reckons, are at risk of revolution because of food scarcity. The big drivers, climate change, the nitrogen cycle, the loss of biodiversity, are all intimately linked with agriculture. Now, if this stuff is beginning to sound a bit like that old book, Limits to Growth, I mean, we all know that book was wrong, yeah? 2012, the Smithsonian decided to check what's happened. And they took those old projections and then overlaid on them the data from 1972 when the book was written until 2000, which is as far as the data went. We're right on track. Remember, though, in the book, there was one scenario in which we didn't crash and burn. And it was where we brought on sustainability measures. We're seeing a very disturbing trend now in our industry and land. The amount of arable land per capita is shrinking, in part because of desertification, in part because of the spread of cities. Much of the farmland's now being leased. Countries like China are going around the world and buying up farmland to feed themselves. Wall Street now sees farmland as the next bubble. They're investing heavily in the Midwest of the United States in productive farmland. And as farmers are going off the land, as the older farmers are retiring, who's buying it? And who would you want to have managing that land? Wes Jackson talks about ratio of eyes per acre. It's also who's inside the eyes. Whose mindset is managing these lands? Do we want it to be a corporate mindset of quickest return, And is that going to lead to the kind of management that we've seen? We're in the muck. Imagine a pool of muck, and that's not far off where humanity is. We need a ladder up out of that muck. And I think the bottom rungs are the things like Bill McKibben trying to stop pipelines, or people trying to save little bits of intact ecosystems, or green buildings. It's still a lot of resources, it's less bad. Corporate social responsibility. Are these companies, is Walmart sustainable because they've announced they're going green? Bill Reed, one of the people who helped invent green architecture, and Carol Sanford have laid out this, if you will, their version of a ladder. Sustainability is only getting our nose above water. It's a system that can go on enduring, but is it where we want to get to? Go back to this graph. Where they see as where we're headed to is this concept of regenerative. And they point out that nature is sustainable because it's regenerative. Sustainability isn't the goal. We're going beyond sustainability. I've been working for the last year or so with John Fullerton, who's on the Savory Institute board, on the Grasslands board. He points out that we now, the planet and people, are in service to the economy, which is itself in service to finance. Money flowing upward into what I call the tower economy. What's wrong with this picture? Well, a lot. And we need to shift it. That finance goes back to being a tool in service to the economy, and we have an economy in service to life, to people, to holism. The current economy is a bit scary. If you look at the growth in financial assets were 100% of GDP around 1980. It doubled to around, in 1800, it doubled by around 1980 to 200% of GDP. Since 1980, it's gone to 400% of GDP. This is a staggering growth in wealth. But what is wealth? 2008, it all started to unravel. And the big institutions, the big banks jumped in, or the central banks jumped in and rescued the big banks. Is this sustainable? You look at the expansion of the balance sheet of the central banks. This is exponential growth. And we all know that exponential growth of any sort is not sustainable. So hands up those of you who think we have solved the economic collapse. It's over. We rescued the banks. It's all good. This picture was shot about 3 blocks from here on the side of a building just up the way when the occupiers were here in London, and I spent some time with them. What is our theory of change? How is change going to come about? Tony had us all change. How is change going to come about in the financial system, in our economic system? Revolution? If you scratch most environmentalists very deeply, that's what they think. It's going to get really bad and then we'll rebuild. Yeah? How many of you have seen this video? If you haven't, go watch it. For starts, it's very funny. Russell Brand is a very articulate comedian, talking with Jeremy Paxman, then BBC commentator. And Brand says, I haven't a flicker of a doubt, it'll be revolution. Really? The other side shoots better than we do. We need a theory of change, of how it is that we are going to take the mess that we are in and go above getting our noses above water. What is it going to take to create an economy in service to life, a regenerative economy? Here's one thought. Take a look at the biggest companies. There are 1,000 companies have half the market capitalization in the world. The G20 countries, the C40 cities, and this notion of bringing this stuff into cities is critically important. And then take 10 billionaires. These, 1,070 people are identifiable emails, are identifiable individuals. Suppose that we come to them with a new theory of change, of how the world as it is risky for them. And it's as risky for them as it is for us. The thing goes down, they go down too. We all go down. Jan Smuts said holism is this universal principle. We heard Bruce talking about the concepts of wholes and how do you manage wholes. We need to start managing the economy, which, as Allan points out, is not a whole. It's a piece of something. When you're standing on the edge of a cliff, wisdom would say, take a step back and then turn around. And when you turn, you see all that we have left behind. The richness of the natural world, of human community, the ancient wisdom, the sacred, what will give us home again. I think our job is to roll up the edges into a new conversation, a new story. Humans learn by story. Facts are not going to change minds, but story does. My old boss, Dave Brower, used to say, what do we want the earth to be like 50 years from now? Let's do a little dreaming. Aim high, he said. Navigators have aimed at the stars for centuries. They haven't hit one yet, but because they aimed high, they found their way. Just north of here, the Isle of Egg. Scotland has net out-migration. The islands were dying. The crofting system there was dying. And a small group of people crowdsourced enough money to buy the island and take it 100% renewably powered. And they're reinvigorating the old crofting system. Wendell Berry, the poet, said, because we have not made our lives to fit our places, the forests are ruined, the fields eroded, the streams polluted, the mountains overturned. Hope, then, to belong to your place by your own knowledge of what it is that no other place is, and by your caring for it as you care for no other place. This place that you belong to, though it is not yours, for it was from the beginning and will be to the end. Hope, then, to belong to your place. Isn't this what Allan is saying? What is your place? How do you know it? What are its weak links? Pete Seeger said the key to the future of the world is finding the optimistic stories and letting them be known. And we have them here. We've been hearing them for the last day and will today. These optimistic stories. Tony, it works. And I think this is more than anything what needs to be told. Not so much the facts and figures and the science, although that's very handy, the peer-reviewed studies. What's going to change? What's going to drive change? What's going to excite people are the stories. And the recognition that edges can be exciting places. Yeah, we're standing on the edge, but edges where a forest meets a meadow is the most abundant place, where ecosystems come together. We need to celebrate a real economy and to invite in the creatives, the beauty, the new ways of saying things, and the heretics. Joel, Allan. We would have been burned at the stake. And yeah, the pioneers get the arrows, but it is these pioneers who have made things happen at the edges, who have the stories, who have the resilience, who are now the ones that we need to listen to. When Allan went on TED, that really began to kick all of this off. And I was privileged to work with Allan several decades before, managing a chunk of ground that John Denver had bought to create a foundation, 1,000 acres of ground. And of course, the John Denverites being of the mindset that humans are really essentially evil, and therefore the way you manage land is to take everybody off of it. The land was filled with noxious weeds, the grass was laid over and thatched, and this is what it now looks like with cows on it, with cell grazing. Allan was kind enough to come and work with us. And you guys have seen this work, the single-strand electric fence, the land at Milkwood, the land in New Mexico. Dan Daggett has shown that you can take cows and use them as a tool to bioremediate land. Even on acid mine tailings, where hydroseeding and all of the traditional systems failed, you can get grass to come back. And we can do this in cooperation with the communities that have heretofore been dispossessed. This is a ranch up in BC, Canada, a First Nations organization serving 30 retailers, family of family-owned ranches, all working together collectively to bring grass beef to market. We have a story, and about 2 days ago it was in the Wall Street Journal. Grass milk is now the hot commodity. I mean, I drink it, it tastes better. What's wrong with going to market with a story that it tastes better? And so in this article, Whole Foods started putting pressure on Organic Valley, this family of organic dairies, to start bringing grass milk, grass beef. The Black Creek Ranch has done some science, higher omega-3s than salmon. That native community's traditional food was salmon. The salmon runs are disappearing. Well, that's okay. Beef is better for you than salmon. Beef may be the only truly sustainable food left on the planet. So, how do you answer people who say, oh, beef is bad for the planet? It may be the only sustainable food left. If it is locally grown, if it is contributing to a local living economy, if it is building social capital within the community, and if it is holistically managed. There are a lot of ifs there. But we have the beginnings of a story, and an entrepreneurial one. Edges are where entrepreneurs have always launched to go and find new worlds. And when you do, you find it's not a flat earth, you don't fall off the edge, it's a round earth. And this whole concept of the circular economy. We need to stitch together this new narrative to create, in Bucky Fuller's words, a world that works for 100% of humanity. People are afraid. That video by Russell Brand was the #1 watched YouTube video for all of 2013, calling for revolution. People are scared. And when people are scared, you have cranial real estate to begin to have a conversation. We have answers. and we have even better a story. How do you take it to the cities? City people eat. Let's start transforming our cities. Now, this is not holistic management, but it is beginning to bridge the conversation of where does urban food come from? What would holistic management in the cities be? We're starting to see urban chickens. How about urban cows? We heard about Holly and her goats in the outskirts of San Francisco. What about bringing grazing into city parks? What are the ways in which, 3/4 of humanity will live in cities in another few years? What is our message to the slum dwellers of the world? Entrepreneurs are the job creation engine. The Kauffman Foundation showed that in all but 7 years, from 1977 until now, the big companies have been net job destroyers. It's the little companies, it's the startups. We think of ourselves as a tiny, beleaguered minority taking the arrows, yeah? Sustainability is breaking out everywhere, whether it be Harvard Business Review studies, or my friend Yvonne Chenard getting the cover of Fortune magazine, or Save Us, the Evil Empire going green. Harvard, sustainability is not the burden on the bottom line it was thought to be. It's the touchstone of all of innovation, and in the future, only companies that have it as a goal will achieve competitive advantage. When those wild-eyed environmentalists at Goldman Sachs tell you that the companies that are the leaders in environment, social, and good governance policy have 25% higher stock value than their less sustainable competitors, guess what? There's a business case. But remember, sustainability is getting our nose above water. So a group of us were asked by the King of Bhutan to reinvent the global economy. Richard and Kate Wilkinson up in York, Bob Costanza at Australian National University, John, myself, are pulling together a group of people from around the world, the best thinkers we can find, to reinvent the global economy. John has laid out a set of principles, and he will shortly be coming out with a paper defining what a regenerative economy, what regenerative capitalism would look like. This is very much a work in progress. The first principle there, right relationship, is this sense of place and of the balance between people, nature. An economy is, the current economy is a straight line. It's linear, but it exists within a human society which exists within nature. So what is the place of the economy? Maimonides said that each of us should see ourselves as though the entire world was held in balance, and anything that we do could tip that balance. What you do every day, what each one of you does every day, the whole world depends on that. And I think Bucky said it best. We're called to be the architects of the future, not its victims. So what would it look like if we managed the world holistically? And if any of you want to play more on this concept, Birju's already stepped up and said he wants to play. With any luck, within the next month or so, we will get funding to really begin this conversation on a global basis. What would be a world that works for 100% of humanity? What would be a global economy managed holistically? I'd love your help. I'll be putting teams of people together, as I said, the best thinkers that I can pull together. And then we're going to take this conversation global. In September, we'll launch a new hub on the Guardian website for a new economy. If we start getting the criticism that was mentioned, the Guardian article, talk back, write in. I told Danielle last night, if that article issues, I will write and say why the guy's wrong. And start telling stories. If every one of you, if that article in fact has issued, or does, write in, tell your story. Tony, it works. Each one of you who has practiced this stuff, it works. I know that because I did it on a piece of ground. Tell our story. And with that, we can build a finer future. Thank you very much.
Hi, folks. Victoria, because I'm a marketing consultant and brand strategist, and I'm beginning to feel like maybe I'm at the wrong conference. I don't know. Because I'm getting a really superficial vibe here. You all seem really shallow. And Allan Savory seems like he just says what people want to hear. I think you should try to be a little more controversial. So it's really been an honor and a pleasure and a privilege to be helping the Savory Institute think about developing its brand with some intention. And a few years ago, I made the decision to devote my strategic experience to building brands that solve problems rather than sell more stuff. And so the Savory Institute is really a dream experience. And there's one part of my history that I want to share, and I promise it has a segue to our next speaker, that has really impacted my ability to help at all. And that is the decision to, instead of study human systems and instead of studying marketing and management systems when I wanted to sort of shift my practice, I went back and studied biomimicry because I felt a void in my own sort of evolutionary curve in terms of that permeability between my own responsibilities in the natural world. And I really don't think that I could have really understood what you're attempting and are actually truly achieving without having had that background in biomimicry and understanding, you know, even cursorily how life works, how holistic management works, and this network that is so magnificent and how that has the potential to continue to work. So thank you for working with me over the last couple of days and never making me feel like a half-naked lone nut dancing on a hillside. Some of you know what I mean by that. But there's something else I could never have done if I hadn't gone back and studied biomimicry, and that is meet my friend Catherine Collins. She is the founder and CEO of Honeybee Capital and the author of The Nature of Investing, which is just outside. We met as students traipsing through the California redwoods, studying lichen and mycelium and taking long periods of time just to study deep patterns in the woods. And for both of us, while we came from different backgrounds, she from finance and investing and I from branding and marketing and communications, we both had very similar intentions of learning or maybe even just relearning what we'd forgotten, which is the inherent intelligence that we all share and instinct that we share with the natural world that enables us to be resilient and adaptive. We actually, Catherine and I, spent 2 full months just studying 3 superorganisms, ants, bees, and mycelium. And we got to geek out on some of the things that you all have described over the course of the last couple days. Pheromones and mycorrhizae and pharmacophagy, which actually is a thing, you can look it up. But while I was still really just beginning to walk through the woods, Catherine was actually well on her way to the publication of her magnificent book. And it really is a must-read because it's so very readable and ingestible, both to the professional investor and just to the layperson who cares about where they spend their time and their money and their energy. And she really does provide a pathway through the lens of life's principles, which is one of the subjects that we learn in biomimicry, to how investing can promote systemic health rather than extract from it, and how we can create an optimal value exchange with our investing practices. But the thing that I really admire about Catherine the most is her complexity. And I know that we all like a nice, big, gooey, juicy spoonful of complexity in this room. And she's really not an either-or person. That's what I really admire about her. She's a both-and person. She's as comfortable in a business suit as she is trekking through Burma. She's as adept at managing a fund for Fidelity Investments as she is studying theology at Harvard Divinity School. And she approaches all of this as, yes, an authority, but also with a tremendous amount of joy and humor and humility and ease that makes her just a pleasure to be around. So please join me in welcoming to the stage my friend, Catherine Collins.
All you.
All right, awesome. Hi, everyone. So my name is Catherine, and I'm an investor. That sounds a little confessional in a lot of corners these days, and for some good reason, as we all unfortunately know. But I want to tell you today what I love about investing, and I think a lot of the themes here will be very familiar to all of you. The very first thing I love about investing is that done properly, it requires you to think. It requires you to think with your full, creative, engaged, multidisciplinary mind all day, every day. In fact, this actual sign is one of my most treasured possessions. My dad worked at IBM Corporation for many years, and as some of you may know, this is their corporate motto. This sign came with me to my very first job when I was in the cubicle overlooking the elevator shaft. It came with me over the years to big corner offices. It came with me from Boston to London, back home again. It was with me when I bought my very first stock. It was with me when I lost my first dollar. It was with me when I got my first big promotion. It was with me when I resigned. So this theme of thinking has been present in my life as long as I can remember, and I'm really grateful for that. Now, I happen to be a professional investor, but I do believe strongly that we are all investors. All day, every decision you make, it's an investment, whether you're investing your time, your energy, your financial resources, or all of the other resources that we have. And so everything I say today, I think applies to investing in that broadest and truest sense. In fact, I would go so far as to say that investing is embodied belief. It is power. Every choice you make, you get to vote for the world that you want to see. And so it's worthy of this full, engaged thought. Now, investing, like many of our fields, has seen a lot of change. And this is one thing that, as we all know, is hard for humans to manage. Some of you might remember the first Wall Street movie back in 1987, and if you ignore the guy in the front, you'll see behind him the Quotron machine, thing of legend in the financial industry. This was a huge, huge breakthrough when it was first invented, and sure enough, by the late 80s, early 90s, it was pretty ubiquitous at large financial firms. But if you weren't a famous movie star and you were instead a lowly, very junior analyst looking at the cement industry, you didn't actually get one of these fancy machines to yourself. You had to share. not a bad thing. And in fact, you had to get up and walk down the hall and wait in line with your colleagues for the chance to see what the stock market was actually doing that day, what was happening to the companies that you were interested in. So it wasn't a very efficient process. If you fast forward, I can get charts like this from 10 different apps just on my phone, which is, in my pocket at all times. This is the entire US stock market, all 500 stocks. You can get price, volume, relative, absolute, sort by sector, whatever you want, any minute of the day, anywhere in the world for free. So there are some huge advantages to this. I still actually can't believe it's possible. This thing, it used to be a precious commodity available only to these few elite people, is now completely democratized. In theory, that's a good thing, and it certainly is more handy. But when I look at that app in my pocket, there's something that's missing. When I had to get up and walk down the hall and wait with my friends to see what was happening in the stock market, I also had to connect with them. As I was waiting in line, I learned what was happening with housing starts, or semiconductor prices, or retail sales. More importantly, I learned what was happening with my colleagues and their lives. So I have all this data now, and it's so much easier and user-friendly than ever before, but that real connection, that real wisdom, is actually further away, a little bit more disconnected. And this kind of cycle has repeated over and over again. With every tool we've invented, with every process we've improved, there's some benefit, which is terrific, and there's also something that is gradually chipped away at. And the things that have been chipped away at are usually a little more fundamental, maybe a little less tangible. So we haven't always recognized them as they've been fading. This concern I have is certainly not a new concern. Thoreau had it long before there was a Quotron, in fact, before there was even a phone. So this idea that we need to work to stay connected is really kind of an ancient one. And one reason I think this connection is so vital is a somewhat technical one, but really an essential one for all of us. And that is this distinction between risk and uncertainty. And I want to spend a minute on this because although it sounds like semantics, it's a really important distinction. A risk is a situation where you don't know what's going to happen, but you know the range of possible outcomes. So if I ask you to pick a number between 1 and 10, you don't know what number I'm thinking of, but you know it's between 1 and 10. You can wrap your head around it. If you're fancy, you can create a model around it. You can make rational, responsible decisions when it's a risky situation. Uncertainty is tricky. It looks a little bit like risk on the surface. It's also a situation where you don't know what's going to happen. But with uncertainty, you also don't know the range of possible outcomes. It could be anything. It could be something you can't even imagine. It is not analyzable, it is not modelable, and it is definitely not analyzable with our linear mechanical sort of tools. Uncertainty is terrifying. And because it's so terrifying, we want to pretend that there's nothing in that bucket, that everything is a risk. And if you just know enough and you're smart enough and you try hard enough, you can control it, you can manage it. So for all investors, the real key question is not how do you manage risk, but how do you think of uncertainty? How do you navigate in those times where you actually don't control it, which I'm sorry to report is most of the time. So in short, our tools have got us better and better maps over time, quite literally, as we've seen in some of the discussions this week. Our maps are better and more complete, and they cover more territory than they ever had. So when it comes to managing risk, we're actually not so bad off. And yet, there is still this edge of the map. There is still this realm where it's just marked, there be dragons. And no one wants to be in that realm. So this question of what to do with uncertainty has been in my mind for a very long time as an investor. And in fact, it came home to roost in a very personal way. Like most of us, I hit a really rough patch professionally. And at this time, I was staying later and later at the office every night. I was building bigger and bigger spreadsheets. I was digging into my models in more and more depth, trying really hard to work my way out of this jam. Luckily, I made time to speak with the honeybee researcher, Tom Seeley from Cornell during this period. And Dr. Seeley has done this amazing work about how honeybees make collective decisions. And they're not just good at making collective decisions, they are excellent. If bees are swarming to a new hive and you give them a choice of hive locations, they pick the single best location over 90% of the time. This is a record that any investor would just kill for. So obviously my attention was grabbed. But what was most valuable, what was most interesting with Dr. Seeley's talk was at the end when he described what conditions made that amazing decision-making possible. And the very first thing that bees do when there's one of those big decisions to be made is they leave the hive. They go out and explore the world around them, and then they come back and report on that information. They don't call an all-hands meeting and bust out their PowerPoint presentations and hide in the corner away from the world. They don't sit at their desks later and later every night building bigger and bigger spreadsheets. And so as Dr. Seeley was talking, I realized I did not need to be sitting at my desk. I needed to be going outward. I needed to be reconnecting with the world in every possible way to get myself out of this jam. Luckily that worked, and the crisis was relatively short-lived for me. But it, again, planted this seed that the natural world was maybe not this precious place that I would go to escape my professional life, but rather an amazing source of wisdom that I needed to be integrating into every decision that I made. So when I left Fidelity with this big question about uncertainty and fear and this desire to return to really bigger essential questions, not what the marginal profit rate was last quarter, I went to divinity school, as all investors do. It was a very interesting experience to be repotted, really, and sort of at mid-career. I always say that ongoing education, it is far and away the best luxury ever. And the best thing about that time at divinity school was I really had time to study fear in a very structured way. And it was only towards the end of those studies that I realized, oh, this is actually what I've been doing for the last 20 years as an investor. We think it's greed, but it's fear that is motivating most of the bad things that are happening in the world. From there, my studies naturally branched to biomimicry, which is where I met Victoria, as you heard. And biomimicry has this central question that is so deceptively simple. It's what would nature do? How would nature perform the function I'm trying to perform in the context that I'm in? So very familiar issues to all of you. What is your context, and what exactly are you trying to do? These seem like such obvious questions, but they are questions that we skip right over in the business world and the financial world most of the time. So this deceptively simple question actually re-roots us at a much more important fundamental level. And the fact that it is a question, I think, is quietly revolutionary. This practice is not starting with an RFP, it's not starting with an algorithm, it's not starting with a mechanical model, it's not starting with a statement, it's not starting with a deadline, it's starting with curiosity, with connection, with a real question. To me, this is the essence of what investing in that truest sense is all about. Now, obviously, that's not a new concept. Our indigenous communities have never forgotten that. And in fact, if you look back through scientific tradition, almost every scientist has a quote like this one from Einstein: look deep into nature, and you will understand everything better. Yet when I look at our business world, and certainly our financial world, this is still a very foreign concept. We have a lot of great activity that's going on related to investing in nature. Many of you are familiar with some of those actions. We also have more and more activity that's focused on investing with nature, thinking of a more aligned kind of approach. These are both hugely important, but my personal focus, my personal passion is to think about investing as nature. How can we transform our actual processes and products and protocols so that we are investing in a way that is not just not hurting nature, but actually drawing from that essential wisdom itself? What would it look like if our investment processes actually were biomimetic? The reason I think this is so important is that working for a long time now in sustainable investing, I've seen time and time again, you have an amazing product, you have fantastic outcomes, you have a model that can grow in a wonderfully connected and organic way, and yet you're still turning to these traditional mechanical factory sort of models when it comes to investing. And time after time, you find that there's a wall that you hit when you do that. You're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and you can kind of shove it in for a little while, but it can't really get you where you want to get. So I'm interested in this more fundamental rerouting, this more fundamental transformation. I want to introduce you to a couple of my new friends who are helping me think through what this world might look like. And I'll just give you a couple because I know we're a little short on time. As we mentioned, we think a lot about risk management in finance. And usually the mental mindset, the framework is, how do I avoid risk? How do I build a wall against risk? How do I shield myself from risk? But this is a sea slug, a nudibranch. So think of the life of a sea slug. You are squishy and really nutritious, and you are living at the bottom of the ocean surrounded by predators. It's not exactly, fun and happy life for a sea slug. And you would think that they might have evolved over time to have really hard shells or the ability to move very quickly. Something that would protect them against this risk that surrounds them everywhere they go. What they have developed is the ability to soak up toxins from the other organisms around them, and instead of being poisoned themselves, they pass those toxins through. It poisons their predators. Super cool. So when I think of risk management now, I think, what might risk management in finance look like if we weren't always running away, but rather somehow able to acknowledge that the risk is there, embrace it, and use it for some sort of benefit? I don't have an answer to that yet, but I think this is a much better question than we've been asking for a long time. Here's another one. We talk about managing volatility a lot and responding to changes around us. And usually for investors, this requires a lot of action and a lot of cost in every sense of the word. This toucan, I'm ashamed to say, I only knew from the carton of my breakfast cereal for a long stretch of my life, but it's much more amazing in reality. This bill is not just good for cartoons. This bill actually serves a vital function. It acts as a giant heat exchanger. So when the temperature fluctuates, and it does by 20, 30 degrees sometimes in a day, the toucan, by managing the blood flow to its bill, can manage its own internal temperature. It doesn't have to move a muscle, doesn't have to flap a single feather. So not only is this very energy efficient, it's also much safer. I look at this toucan and I think, what would it look like if we could respond to volatility in this calm, integrated way without all this flapping around? Again, I have lots of natural friends, and if you want to grab me at the break, we can talk about any creature you like. The final one is a new friend of mine. This is the desert wood rat. This rat lives in the Mojave Desert, and it eats plants that are very full of creosote, which is really hard to digest and would kill most things. So the wood rat is actually the only thing that eats a lot of the plants in its environment. And we've known for a long time that the wood rat has this amazing ability to process creosote. But just in the last few months, researchers finally figured out how and why. And it turns out it's not actually the rat at all. It's the microbiome in the rat's gut that makes this all possible. Again, this won't be too shocking to any of you. If you give these rats antibiotics, they die just like everything else when it eats the creosote. So we think a lot about what makes for effective collaborations and partnerships, and there are such insidious power dynamics that tend to come along with that. They usually relate to size and scale and this idea that the bigger entity is more powerful. But in this case, without this teeny tiny microbiome, this rat dies. It resets all your thoughts about what it is that makes an effective collaboration and partnership. So time and time again, looking to the natural world for inspiration doesn't just give a quick pat answer, check the box and now you're biomimetic. It leads you to these better questions, and it's those questions, that reframing that we heard about earlier, that is really needed to get us where we need to go. There's one more thing. As much as I love biomimicry for its intellectual rigor, for its ability to draw upon proven scientific fact, for its observability, all very friendly things to my linear analytical mind, there's something else there. We talked earlier about fear. When you reconnect with your natural world, when you integrate it into every decision that you're making in this way, there's this great sense of homecoming. There's this decrease in fear. It's one of the only things I have found that makes that land of uncertainty a little less terrifying. And so I'm realizing now that in addition to my think sign, which I still treasure and always will, I might need some more signs. I might need one that says do. I might need one that reminds me to connect. I might even need one that says trust, or heaven forbid, love. The fact that I feel a little queasy saying that in a businessy sort of setting tells me that there's something really important there. It tells me that this is still, for many business people, the land of dragons. That area where you're excited, but boy, it's really terrifying at the same time. One of my favorite lessons in divinity school was a simple lesson in semantics, and we were learning the root words for bravery versus courage. And the root word for bravery is bravere, it's face, so it's literally a strong face. And all of my great risk assessing tools, all of my great linear capabilities, I think, stood me in good stead. They made me a brave investor, which is a great thing. And it really helps when you're in that realm of risk. But these tools of biomimicry, they relate more to courage. The root word for courage is cœur, the French word for heart. It is quite literally strength from within, a different source entirely. I want to invest not just with bravery, but with courage. And biomimicry is helping me. I too want to reference Pete Seeger as I close here. I read a great set of stories from him as he passed a few years ago, and one account said people were always coming up to him saying, "Hey, Pete, I want to change the world. Where should I go? What do I do? You know, send me to India, send me here, send me there." And he always cautioned people, no, stay where you are. Don't run away, dig in. So I will admit that there is no one who knows the dark and scary places in finance better than I do. I understand how broken it is in some very fundamental ways. But this is my home. This is my professional hometown. And for as creepy and dark and scary as some of the alleyways are, I can still see everything that is good there. I can see the potential for this to be a thriving, vibrant community. I can see so clearly how this community can be rerouted in service to others, in service to our planet, in service to life itself, as Hunter so eloquently referenced. So even though it is tempting to run away, to secede on a lot of days, and to just renounce my financial ways, I'm not going to leave. I'm taking all my new signs, I'm taking all my new friends, I'm taking all my new tools, and I'm digging in. And I hope you'll join me. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Wasn't that amazing? All right, so we've got a quick 30-minute break, and we've got catering service out there, so they'll have coffee, tea, and biscuits and stuff. So 30 minutes, and then we'll come back in here. Thank you.